Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Asher Agency, a full-service marketing agency with offices in Indiana, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. For nearly 50 years, Asher has helped our clients tell their stories, reach customers and prospects, and stand out from the crowd. To learn more about how we can help your company, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. My guest is Alec Johnson. Alec, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for being here in person. We don't have to tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway.
Okay.
You got an invitation for us to do the podcast, and I somehow made you believe it was a virtual interview. So I'm sitting at my desk in between interviews, and a Teams notification pops up, and I'm like, oh no, I hope that's not him. And it was, but fortunately you're right down the street, and you were good enough to come here and do this in person. So thanks for that pivot.
You're very welcome. And the funny thing is I've got terrible lighting in my office. And so I had the lights turned off, and I was sitting in the dark with the door locked, ready to do the interview. So this is better. This is much better.
It looked a little bit like one of those cybersecurity videos where you're hacking into someone's system.
If I have the lights on, it looks like I'm glowing. So this is much better.
Okay, well, we'll try to give you a halo here.
That's cool.
But we'll do that in an audio way instead of visually. Well, I've heard so many great things about you, and I mean that very genuinely. Kara Kelly, our CEO, was just talking about how she knows you and talking about a lot of the great things, great experiences you've had together. So I really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about you. And I'd like to start at the beginning, whatever that is for you. One of the first things we talk to our guests about is their career path. And some people figure that out early. They know what they want to do, and then they go do it. Some of us, myself very much included, it's more of a winding path. And you're trained in landscape architecture originally, correct?
That's correct.
Is that something you had an appreciation for as a young person and knew you wanted to do, or was it a little bit of an experiment to get there?
Yeah, I absolutely had no idea what a landscape architect was when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And so my path is probably more similar to yours than others in the sense that there was no expectation for me to go to college. Yeah. And so if I had any desire to do that, it would have been sort of self-motivated.
Yep.
And I do remember in middle school taking an aptitude test that sort of would determine a potential career path.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be an architect. And I took this test, and they said, you're not good enough at math.
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't do that. So what
Squishing your dreams very early.
What a disservice to a young kid, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it was sort of ridiculous in retrospect.
Oh, sure.
But at that point, I sort of just gave up on that idea. And so, no, it took me a long time. I graduated high school. My parents did end up, that sent me to a Bible college up in Minnesota.
Okay.
And so I lasted a semester in the dorms there before I was booted out of the dorms. Growing up in a small town in Iowa, we don't need to go into all of that.
I was going to say, we don't have time for all that.
No. Yeah, so
that'll be the sequel.
Okay.
We'll do that as a return conversation.
No, it was not for me. And I was coming out of a small town in Iowa into a bigger city to Minneapolis, and I just wanted to do everything. I wanted to experience life. And college took a back seat, and I ended up really just dropping out after a year.
Well, it's such a huge transition. I just started teaching a class today, and I'm teaching traditional age college students. And the first thing I did is I put my transcript up on the screen, and I showed them the disaster that was my first semester. Because you're living on your own for the first time. You've got all these possibilities. You're trying to manage your own schedule. You don't have anyone there to nudge you and say, hey, it's time to wake up. Right. And for me, that didn't work out so well until I figured it out, which was later.
Yeah, and I wasn't a great student. I was in the bottom 20, I think, in my class ranking. Yeah. But surprisingly, I think I was in the top 3 or 5 for ACT, SAT scores. So if I wasn't interested in a class, I probably wasn't going to put my attention on it. So.
Yeah, same. I used to tell people as a kid, if I were interested, I was more than interested in anyone you were ever going to meet. But that was only about a few things. And if I wasn't, I was the least interested person you're ever going to meet. Yeah. And that showed in my grades for sure.
Yeah. So at that point, after I left the Bible college, I I didn't want to just, I mean, I had an option to transfer to the University of Minnesota. I got an acceptance there and probably could have made my way through with loans, but I was young, I was 18 years old, 19 years old, and I really didn't want to saddle myself with student loans when I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah, kind of ahead of your time in that thinking.
Maybe, but I remember thinking like, what's the hurry? And that was to be brutally honest. I mean, I was interested in having some fun for a little while. I was young and I wanted to experience life. And so I bought a $500 car and I just took off and I traveled for what ended up being, I think 7-8 years.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Drove to different places and got a job and worked. And when I got bored, I jumped in the car. I didn't have much stuff, so I could go someplace else. And I did that for quite a while. Yeah. Ended up, all the while, to make sure you understand I'm answering your question, all the while in the back of my head, I'm thinking at some point I'll go to college, right? I saw the value in advanced education. And
but not in a rush to do it.
But I wasn't in a rush, and I wanted to make sure it was something that I really wanted to do. And so I ended up on a ranch in Texas. I was working as a wrangler on a ranch.
That's amazing.
Down by Austin and San Antonio. In Comfort, Texas, and it was amazing. It was a great experience, and I'm a musician, and so I was playing and basically roadhouses and just, I mean, it was really a great experience. My sister was having a baby back in Iowa, and so I came back on a Greyhound bus just for a couple of weeks. I didn't have the car anymore. I don't remember where that ended up. But
you got your $500 worth out of it.
I certainly did. So I came back for my sister for a couple of weeks. She had her baby, my niece, and while I was back, I went and visited some friends at University of Northern Iowa. And while I was there, I met this woman named Laura. And long story short, I never went back to Texas. Left anything that was there that I had, I just left. Yeah. And haven't been back to that spot since. And I think she was finishing grad school, and then her first job was in Des Moines, Iowa, so we moved together to Des Moines, Iowa. Okay. And then it took me just a few years before I discovered landscape architecture.
Yeah. So what was interesting as a career path about that? What made you say this might be for me?
Well, the first thing was I was working for a landscape company, planting, digging holes, spreading mulch, and I think it was probably a 98-degree day in July, and I thought it would be really great to be the guy that's telling people where to dig.
I want to do this job, just not outside.
Yeah. Who's the guy that drew these plans that's telling me where to plant this thing? I'd like to be that guy instead. I had learned that the owner of the company was a landscape architect, had formerly worked at a big firm on the East Coast, and had moved back to Iowa to start a smaller landscape design build company. So I just started asking him questions. And once I discovered what landscape architecture really was, the way that it sort of fuses science and creativity and art and sales and just a lot of different things that were interesting to me, I realized immediately that was for me. Yeah.
Well, and, I think especially today, a lot of us you want to spend time, if not always in nature, with nature and understanding the natural world. Was that a draw for you at all?
Yeah, it certainly was. It certainly was. And maybe there was a romanticized ideal on what a landscape architect day-to-day life was. It turns out there's an awful lot of sitting in front of a computer in AutoCAD.
So maybe being the guy inside isn't all that great.
I mean,
they all have their trade-offs.
You get to a certain point in your career when you get to decide if you want to be in front of the computer, if you want to be out on a job site. And so that's kind of the goal, is to be the old guy that gets to decide what he wants to do. But you have to put in your time, and you have to spend time learning, learning the skills and learning what you need to know to be a good, successful landscape architect.
Yeah. So you've parlayed that into an interesting role that you somewhat recently took on with the city of Fort Wayne. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I went to Iowa State University, so we lived in Des Moines, Iowa. Yeah. I was accepted into the College of Design at Iowa State University. Non-traditional student. I'm 29 at this point. My wife is pregnant. We have a mortgage. And I started driving to Ames, which was about an hour away every day.
Okay.
For school. And so when I graduated, we wanted to stay in Des Moines, and there was no jobs in Des Moines when I graduated. So we ended up moving to Minneapolis.
Okay.
And my first job was in Minneapolis.
Okay.
Worked for an architecture firm there, ended up after about 2.5 years leading their landscape architecture division. I wanted to start my own firm. That was really my goal. And to get there, I kind of thought maybe I need a wider breadth of experience.
Sure.
And at that same time, this job opened up in Fort Wayne for a city landscape architect for the Parks and Recreation Department.
Okay, and you knew nothing about Fort Wayne.
I knew a little bit about Fort Wayne. My wife's sister had moved to Fort Wayne probably 15 years before that.
Okay, all right.
And so we had visited a few times.
Okay.
They lived southwest.
Yep.
At this time, 20 years ago, there wasn't a ton going on downtown. I never saw downtown.
I remember that vividly.
Yeah.
I remember it was one of my first job interviews, and this is closer to 25 years ago. I remember it was downtown Fort Wayne, and I'm driving, and I'm like, okay, I just saw some tall buildings. I must be close. And then I was like, oh, no, that was it. I got to turn around. And, you know, when you say there wasn't much going on, you know, when I started here at Asher, we were in the same building we're in today. This is 21 and a half years ago.
Okay.
If I wanted to go to lunch, there were literally like 5 choices.
Yeah.
And now there's, you know, more than you could go to in a year almost.
Sure.
So very different place than it was.
Yeah, and I've told people before the story of my interview. I flew into town and on my own dime. So the cheapest flight I could get was an overnight flight, and I didn't sleep all night.
Oh, geez. Great way to prepare for an interview.
Yeah. I remember my sister-in-law driving me to the office, which was at State and Parnell. That's where the Parks Department's office was for my interview. And I don't remember what route we took, but I remember just thinking it was probably Ardmore.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, what is this place? There's a quarry and a dump, and it's very industrial. And, and we didn't go through downtown to get there. I'm not sure how we ended up getting there, but at that point I was pretty convinced I wasn't going to take the job. And that's probably why I interviewed well. I was tired.
Yeah.
I didn't really care because I didn't think I was going to take the job.
All right, kids. So the key to a good interview is don't sleep and don't care, and you'll do fine.
Yeah. So anyway, it's great that it worked out.
Yeah.
I accepted the role. We said we're going to move here. We're going to live here 3 years.
Yeah.
And then we'll move back to Minneapolis or Des Moines where I'll start my firm.
Wow.
And so the first project that I had the pleasure of working on was Parkview Field. And 3 years into the move, Laura and I had a conversation. We're like, what are we doing here? And we both decided that we were going to stay.
Yeah. Well, and Parkview Field at the time was somewhat controversial.
It was very controversial from my viewpoint.
Okay. I wanted you to say very
yes.
Yeah.
Everybody was asking me about it because they knew people that I met knew I was working on it. And most of the people that I met thought it was a terrible idea.
Well, and looking back, it was there were things that came before it, right? The main library expansion.
Right.
I always think of that as like one of the first things I was like, they didn't need to do that, but it makes downtown better.
Yeah.
And I remember like J.K. O'Donnell, strangely, I was like, that's way cooler than I thought it was going to be, right? And Parkview Field was definitely that, very conspicuously that, but that's when everything, I think, started to change.
Yeah, and we saw that happening in those 3 years.
We did, yeah.
Parkview Field and then sort of what was starting to follow behind that. And we made a conscious decision, let's stay here. Because of my role with the city, I get to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And it was exciting. It was like, this is going to be fun. And I remember saying out loud to my wife, you know, if at any point the city screws this up, we're out of here, right? Yeah. But right now, this feels like a really good thing. And let's give it a few more years, and then I can start my own firm and leave the city. And
had you built up a network beyond coworkers at that point? Were you wired into relationships here at that point?
At 3 years, for sure. At 3 years, for sure. The first year was rough. But by year 3, we certainly had a good friend group, and we went to a lot of art openings and concerts, and go down to the Brass Rail for a show, and so we were able to meet a lot of people fairly quickly.
Well, and that can be somewhat tough to do when you have a family, right? It's one of the things. What I really admire about that is, I talk to a lot of the students I work with and other young people. And I say, you get to your mid-20s, late 20s, and people's friend groups are kind of established. You can still meet people through work. You can meet people if you have kids in school together.
Yeah.
But it's much harder to build a network and make friends when you start to get a little older. So it's great that you were able to navigate all that.
Yeah, it's really been wonderful. Like I'm not sure if I hadn't spent time traveling and living in Vancouver and Austin and San Antonio and Omaha and Minneapolis, I would have been as keen to stay here. But I felt like I had done some of my exploring and seeing what big cities had to offer, and I thought what Fort Wayne has going on here is really exciting.
Yeah.
We're so close to big cities that we can visit easily. Yeah. And so, it was less about cost of living, great place to raise a family. It was more, this is exciting. What's happening? Let's be a part of it.
Yeah. And to me, the day-to-day, right? So I grew up in Boston, and a lot of people are like, why would you ever move from Boston, which I still love, to Fort Wayne? And I was like, okay, well, let's factor in that my commute was an hour and a half each way every day, spending 3 hours getting to and from work. Yeah. There were many days in the winter where I dug myself out of the snow, came back home to dig myself into a parking space, and the next morning to dig myself out again. Yeah. That got really old really fast. So, it looks really glamorous from the outside looking in, but there's something about, the word that I used to use that I think makes Fort Wayne a great place to live. It used to be accessibility. Everything's accessible. You can get to opportunities. You can get to people. Sure. But now I think part of it is accountability. One of the reasons why I think people are a little bit... There's great people everywhere. There's not so great people everywhere. But in Fort Wayne, you're going to see people again. Yeah, right. So, and this is a lesson I've learned the hard way over the years. But it's kind of like, if you don't treat people well, it's eventually going to catch up to you. There was a guest I had on the podcast who... I used to be more of a hothead when I was younger, and she had an interaction with me when I was a customer of hers. And I was like, I don't care what needs to happen, just do it. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, she's on the podcast and she's telling people that story. Really? Good for her, right? But, that accountability, I think, is part of it, too. Yeah. Harder to do, though. I admire the fact you did it a little bit later than many people do it, but still got wired in. So let's talk about what you're doing now at the city, what that role is, and what that involves.
Yeah, so started the career with the Parks Department. Yeah. I ended up as Deputy Director of the Department of Planning and Development.
And I'll interject for a second and say we have really great parks in Fort Wayne.
Oh my gosh.
Really great green space.
That was really what ended up, despite the experience arriving in Fort Wayne for the interview, when we left the interview, we drove through Headwaters Park and through downtown. And so I was like, okay, this is better. Yeah. And I knew from my research, I had basically memorized the downtown blueprint plan. And I knew from my research on the Parks Department that it was a well-funded, it was a amazingly supported, appreciated, loved park system. Yeah. And that was my experience. It was, I was with Parks for 18 years, 18 years, and assumed I would retire in Parks at some point. And about a year ago, just a little over a year ago, I was asked if I was interested in this position down at Citizen Square. Our offices are at State and Parnell, as I mentioned, so there was a little bit of separation between Parks and the government.
Not so many people looking over the shoulder. Yeah,
well, I think that's good in some ways because Parks gets a lot of donations and people leave money to Parks and they don't associate it with city government, which can sometimes be a good thing. Yeah. And so I was approached with an opportunity to move to the Community Development Department and be the redevelopment director for the city of Fort Wayne. Yeah. And my initial reaction was, well, that's very flattering. It's a really kind of a cool position. Yeah. But no thanks. I'm just really not.
Did you think it was too daunting?
No, I just didn't think it was something I was interested in. Okay. I was a designer, and I had sort of worked into this administrator role as deputy director, and I had I had my first sort of taste of leadership and working with staff, and over the years, I really liked that. And just didn't think it was a good move. I always felt really good about what I did in Parks, right? Yeah. And I wasn't sure I'd feel that way in this other position. And so I I met with a couple friends over the next couple of days that lived in the economic development world that I trusted.
Yeah.
Both of them hoping they would just confirm my bias and talk me out of it.
Yeah, make it easy for you.
Yeah, make it easy. Yeah, you don't want to do that. But neither one of them did that. They both said, you would be perfect. Like, this is perfect for you. And I wasn't sure exactly why. We talked about urban design and how this role could use somebody with some experience, expertise, skill in urban design in addition to the economic development stuff.
Yeah.
But what I had to understand myself was, why do I really love working at parks? What is it about that job that I love? And what I came to understand was the act of taking, let's just say Promenade Park, for example, a space where nothing exists, and you have this blank slate. You work, you design, you collaborate.
Yeah.
You sweat, you cry, you do all of these things, and then you end up with this new space where people live their lives. And so what a great joy and privilege and responsibility for me to lead the design team for Promenade Park, and then a year later to just sit in the park quietly and watch people, grandparents with their grandkids, and a couple that's obviously on their first date.
Yeah.
Like, that's what gave me job satisfaction, and I just felt great about that. And what I eventually figured out about this new role was, it's the same thing. It's just zooming out
on a bigger scale.
On a bigger scale across the city, and not just parks, things like Electric Works and the Landing and some of the private development that happens around Riverfront. And so it was also a decision, a choice in some ways between comfort and challenge. I'll be honest. I mean, the work at parks was challenging, but I knew it inside and out. Yeah. And this was an unknown. Yeah. And I'm only, at this time 54, thinking I got plenty of years left. Yeah. Like, do I want to challenge? And I did, and I do. Yeah. So I accepted the job a year and 2 months ago, I think. Yeah. And so it's been quite a ride.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome. And
thank you.
Going back to, what Fort Wayne was like when I first moved here, one of the things that was always, and it was a question asked completely out of ignorance, but I moved here and I was like, Fort Wayne has turned its back on all its natural resources. It's like you've got these rivers and there's nothing on the rivers. And that's maybe the biggest change that's happened in the last 25 years, is really embracing what's unique about Fort Wayne. Even something like Electric Works, old buildings that were just deteriorating, and then saying, okay, what can we do with this? How do we turn this into an asset? Seeing that with the river, seeing that Electric Works, seeing it, where, we're going to have floods. So how do we mitigate damage and turn that into a beautiful space when it's not underwater, right? Things like that, pretty amazing from a resident standpoint.
Yeah, and it wasn't rocket science either. I mean, the parks were built over the years but frankly by landscape architects, by designers who happen to be park directors and park managers. And that's why you see many of our parks along rivers. They understood that this is going to flood, and let's allow it to flood. And that was sort of our design ethos on Promenade Park was, number one, we want to connect people back to the rivers. Number two, we know it's going to flood. We're not going to try to stop that.
100%.
We're going to allow it and plan for it. So.
Well, and when I was on the Trails Board, one of the things that I would try to help people understand, only because I came to understand it myself, is that when trails, in some cases, are underwater, that's a good thing, because it's not homes, it's not businesses.
Exactly.
It's something that is discretionary. Yeah, you love when it's available, but it was built with intention to, mitigate the damage that can be done by that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the stuff that you're excited about. Maybe that's, keeping you up at night in a good way in 2026. What are some of the big projects that are on your plate?
Oh, there's a lot. There's some, frankly, that I'm not going to be able to talk about. Unfortunately, I probably shouldn't even bring that up.
We'll save that for the sequel as well. How's that?
Great. I think there's two things that come to mind. Number one is just some initiatives that we're working on now. In some ways, a response to SB1 and the changes that have happened in the tax structure of the city and our budget. Number two, because this was also something I shared with Mayor Tucker, as we talked about whether or not I'd be taking this job, is I said, I've watched development happen over these years. I've been an armchair quarterback and probably criticized in some ways the way things may have happened from my perspective. And Parkview Field was a good example. I remember thinking, like, this wasn't a great deal for the city. You know, if you really just look at what the structure of the deal was, it doesn't feel like a great deal. I understand now that was the deal that had to happen at that time. Nobody wanted to come to Fort Wayne to set up their business or to a developer.
It was a domino that had to fall for other stuff to happen.
And so I had a heart and a belief that there is definitely a place for large mixed-use developments in downtown Fort Wayne and in Fort Wayne generally. I also believe that we need to create an environment and an ecosystem where small-scale development can happen and be incentivized in the same way that large projects. So the combination of that sort of just natural bent and desire of mine and Mayor Tucker's, frankly, we agreed on that. And SB1 and the impacts on the budget has made it possible now, if not necessary, to start to focus on some of these smaller scale developments. And you know, it's a way that cities naturally have developed over time is, you know, you can afford to do one small building and then you add another one next to that and another one. And so that's one of the things we're trying to create an incentive program along with just some strategies and guidelines for small scale development. On the opposite end of that is an exciting project like North River. So North River District, folks may have heard about the field house component of that. That's important. But the idea that we've got this 29-acre
been sitting there for a long time.
Anthony, I've designed 2 parks on that property in my career. I think Mayor Graham Richards was the first one.
So let me ask you a question, and if you can't answer it, understood. But why has that been such a challenge to develop that property?
Well, I think at the time that the first time I was asked, can you come up with a conceptual design for this, it was still owned by a family and a business.
So privately owned.
It was privately owned. It wasn't even for sale yet.
It was part of the vision, but some things needed to happen before that could become reality.
And they were like, well, what could we do here if the city bought it? This was before, you know, riverfront discussions, anything. And that never went anywhere. The property ended up for sale. It wasn't selling. Mayor Henry asked the same thing. Let's design a park for this space. I didn't want to recycle the same design, so I redesigned
There's no fun in that.
No. Again, it just never went anywhere because the city didn't want to step in and necessarily buy the property at that time. We're like, the best thing to happen is if somebody comes in and buys this property and we let them develop, whoever owns it, do what they want to do here. But over time, it became apparent that wasn't going to happen. There was and is a level of environmental remediation that has to happen there that's daunting for a private developer. And so eventually the city realized if we want this property at some point to be an asset to the community, the city needs to buy it. The city has access to federal brownfield grants to provide funding to do the cleanup that's necessary. So very wisely, before I was ever in the picture with redevelopment, Redevelopment Commission and Authority eventually ended up buying that property. And so I think following that, you know, that's when the ideation started happening. What should we do here? And that sort of started to mesh with the timing on Riverfront. I don't think there was ever anything that sort of coalesced the idea of an arena, the idea of a stadium. All of those things were sort of talked about, sort of studied, sort of evaluated. And I can remember when I started this job, the first week, the deputy mayor called me up and said, we've got this project for North River that we'd like you to spearhead. And they showed me some renderings.
Welcome to the new job.
Welcome to the new job. And it was a field house, a youth sports and amateur sports field house, which anchored this entire district of new development, both housing, commercial, retail, all of these things. And I wasn't immediately excited about it. And for me to to work on something, to sell it, I really need to believe in it. And so I started doing my own research and trying to understand, is this a good idea? Is this really the right thing here?
Yeah.
And what I came to understand was, number one, youth sports tourism, if you're just thinking sort of economically, what are economic drivers? It's a $50+ billion.
You've got hotel stays, you've got restaurants, you've got other impacts on other tourism.
Yeah, it's growing so fast. Like, it didn't slow down during COVID. It barely slowed down during COVID. It just keeps growing and growing. And everybody I know, or I think everybody knows somebody that has kids in travel sports.
Next door neighbor just started travel baseball.
Yeah, so
he's going to be doing that for 10 years.
All over the place, and that's great, right? Yeah. I think that's really cool, and we never did that. That really wasn't available or a thing when my kids were growing up.
Yeah.
But what I've heard from friends is it's a great time to be with your kids in the car, on the car ride, and have conversations. But a lot of times the experience when you get to these venues isn't great. Many of them are located at the edge of town, along an interstate.
Yeah.
So you pull up, you roll out of the car for the basketball games or whatever. You're in this big parking lot. You get back in the car. You drive to the next exit to try to find a Olive Garden or whatever chain restaurant you're going to eat at.
Yeah, stay in the chain hotel, go to the chain restaurant.
Yeah, just that was the big complaint, was that sort of experience. And so what I came to understand from talking with developers who were interested in this project, and not just developers, but also sports management companies and designers, was that Fort Wayne was, this project was really unique. The product that we were contemplating was very unique because it's downtown.
Yep.
You can imagine with your family driving up to the hotel that's right next to the arena on Clinton Street, across from Science Central, Lawton Park, Riverfront.
Yeah.
You do your event, you walk out the door.
And there you are.
And you're right in the middle of it. The landing feels, even to me, like a long way away.
I was just going to say that. That's the thing. And I was hesitant to say it because with someone with your experience, it might sound like an ignorant thing to say. But when I originally was hearing about North River, I was like, and I'm a big trails nerd, so I walk Greenway all the time.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it feel so far away is it's so vacant.
Right.
But it's kind of like when I first heard about Promenade Park, I was like, this is really great, but it seems like they're trying to do a lot. And then it all came together, and I was like, this works together really well.
Yeah.
And it really complements, what's already been developed in a way that I think is hard to appreciate now, but once it happens, it'll make total sense.
Yeah, and I'm glad you described it that way, because my job has always been sort of lived in this space of long-term planning, right? You end up getting down to the details of what plants and what material the handrail is.
Sure.
But I have to think 25 years down the road, you know, as Deputy Director of Planning and Development. It was in my job title. I had to think out.
Yeah.
And we sort of do the same thing in redevelopment and community development. Like, if you just look at what's in front of you right now, it can be daunting. It can also just maybe not make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But when you think about what happens after all of this is built out and you're 10 years down the road. But the point is that to walk from the northern edge of North River by Science Central to the landing takes about 6 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and it's, there's an old thing in Fort Wayne, at least as long as I've been here, where people will say, it's not true, but, there's nowhere to park downtown.
Yeah.
The truth is I shouldn't say there's nowhere, but there's limited availability for free parking right outside the building you want to go to.
Sure.
And if the experience from getting from parking to where you want to be isn't good, it's going to seem like an eternity.
Exactly.
But you light up some alleyways, you put some murals on the buildings, you put some interesting things along the way, and all of a sudden, 6 minutes seems like 6 minutes and not 60.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and my experience in that regard is, when I visit other cities, when I go to Chicago or I go to New York, if I'm going to go to a restaurant or go see a show or go to a museum, I'm Googling how far is it to walk.
Yeah.
If it's less than half an hour, I'm going to walk.
100%, yeah.
The walk is part of the journey, right?
That's it.
I mean, you're seeing
For me,
things.
that's the most fun.
It is the most fun, and you see all these things, and so we're sort of in this infant toddler stage of our development as a city where we'll get to that point.
Yeah.
We'll get to that point where the journey from the field house to Electric Works is going to be great, a great experience. Urban Trail, all of these different things, these connections, these things that we're thinking about now, but inform the future.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. So because this is the Asher Marketing Podcast, I need to ask this question. So how are you telling the story of North River? How are you getting other people excited about it?
Well, that's important. That's very important. And I heard that when we started talking about North River, told from the story of Parkview Field and how that required people constantly, going to speak to the Rotary and to young leaders of Northeast Indiana, talk about the project so people understand it. So that's something that I do now.
Yeah.
We hired an amazing marketing company called Asher Agency.
I hear those guys are great.
to help us put together basically this sort of media package that we can start to help people understand what this is. Because there was confusion about a field house. Like, what does that mean? A district, the North River District, what does that mean? And so we're just sort of in the beginning of that process of telling the story. But you helped us with a video. Asher helped us with a video that you can find on YouTube and on the city's website. It's amazing. There's interviews with parents of kids that are in travel sports. There's interviews with business owners on Wells Street who can't wait to see how this affects them, right? And we're working very hard to make sure that the neighborhood that this is adjacent to, the Bloomingdale neighborhood, it rises up along with this development rather than feeling like it's separate. So we'll probably limit to some extent, we'll limit the amount of retail, commercial restaurants right at North River and push people up 2 blocks over to Wells Street to make sure that Wells Street sees the same benefit there and becomes a stronger neighborhood. So that's very important to us. And so the business owners are excited, the neighborhood leadership is excited, and we want to keep telling that story so the community sees that same vision and understands the value of this project. And I always want to make sure that people understand it's not just about the field house. We're building this is 29 acres. The field house is going to take up 5. This isn't a completely new neighborhood that's going to be vibrant. There's going to be public space. It's going to connect directly to the riverfront, and that's the story that we're trying.
Well, it's going to make Promenade Park better. It's going to make Science Central better. It's going to make the trail that runs up Clinton better. It's going to make the Puffer Belly South better, which will make the Puffer Belly North better. It just has the potential of a ripple effect.
Exactly.
And we really appreciate the opportunity to be somewhat involved in telling that story. So thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I want to pivot to a few quick hit questions. We've covered a lot of ground, but I want to hear your best advice on a few things. So you've been very deliberate in some respects in your career choices over the years, and you've had a lot of experimentation, a lot of exploration. What have you learned in that? What's your best career advice coming out of all this?
Oh, that's a really great question. If I had to boil it down to one thing, it really, as cliche as it really has been about relationships. And what I mean by that is I'm a naturally curious person. I love meeting new people. I love
That's why I do this, quite honestly.
I love having conversations with all kinds of different people. And that's sort of just what I do in my nature, and I've done that over these years since I've been in Fort Wayne. So when the opportunity arises that there's this position that's available, my name comes up. Somebody says, well, what about Alec? Oh, I worked with Alec on this thing, and we became close and we became friends. And I think I certainly undervalued that when I was younger. And I think like even my kids probably undervalue that as they're starting in their careers, just how important that is. And it's not to do it to be self-serving and to be manipulative, right? It's truly enjoying meeting people, truly understanding like, what are your needs? And you understand my needs. And when there's an opportunity to help each other, we can help each other. So the importance of forming relationships, nurturing relationships is important as a human, but it ends up yielding dividends in your career.
100%.
Right?
100%.
And the opposite is true as well. If you have bad relationships and 100%. You do things that aren't so great, that's going to come back and get you too.
100%. And it's where that accountability comes in.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, there's a panel I'm going to be on in a few weeks about networking. And I think networking is kind of a dirty word and it has a bad name. But, my favorite advice about networking is be a curious human being, ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
People really, in today's environment, they don't have the opportunity to pay attention until they hear something that's relevant to them and the people they care about. Yeah. How are you going to know that if you don't ask questions? Right. What lights them up? What gets them angry? What do they want to solve in the world? And if anything, what role can you play? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's helping them with whatever they're trying to do. Sometimes it's just listening.
Yeah, and you just said the word there, helping, and I think that's intertwined right there with relationships. Is my ultimate goal is to be helpful.
Yeah,
and that shows itself in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But it can be unique. It can make you stand out. Like
100%.
Sometimes people are just like, well, I've got my job over here, and this is what I do.
Yeah.
If you gain a reputation and you truly are seeking to be helpful to people. It makes you stand out.
100%.
And so as career advice, it's great career advice to build relationships, be as helpful as you can with people, and I promise you you're going to benefit from that.
Yeah, good things will happen for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, second quick hit question. What is a myth or misconception about the work that you do that you want to maybe debunk, or maybe it's something that's not appreciated well enough? And it could be about working in city government.
Yeah.
It could be about, working in the economic development field.
Sure. Well, the low-hanging fruit there, I think, is maybe dispelling the rumor, or the sort of perception that government employees don't work as hard as private sector employees, aren't as talented. That's why they're doing it.
Yeah.
My experience, both working in the private sector and working, frankly, with landscape architect consultants over the years as a member of government, but working with private firms, is that the people that work for the city are incredibly talented. They could be potentially making more money in a private private environment, but either they just see the value there and they have a heart to be a public servant.
Yeah.
I'll go back to what I said earlier about the satisfaction of creating places from nothing and seeing people live their lives. And so I think that, man, I don't know that you could ever dispel that notion or that that sort of feeling.
Yeah.
But my experience has been the opposite, and that people work hard and they try to do more and more with less as budget cuts happen, and you have to do that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the easy answer. I think what surprised me, and I think what I see now is the biggest, I guess, misconception, is projects like the mixed-use projects downtown, Riverfront at Promenade, for example, North River at some point, when we'll begin putting together the funding stack for that, is that this is a burden on taxpayers. That's what I sort of had heard as I came into this job. Tax increment financing, or TIF, is a major component of what I do. I barely knew what that was when I was first asked about this job.
Yeah.
And so again, I go back to the basics and I say, what is TIF? Do I believe in this? Is this a good tool?
Yeah.
Watching TIF 101 YouTube videos, on my iPad in bed, trying to figure this out. I progressed beyond that, but I think to understand that at its heart, redevelopment is taking blighted areas of a urban center in a city that isn't seeing natural private development, right? If it's already seeing private development, I'm hands off if I can be.
Yeah.
But if it's not happening, tax increment financing is a tool. And it basically, I'm not going to get too far into that because it's very nerdy and very hard to understand, or probably harder to describe in a way that's easy to understand. But essentially, if you look at a property that's vacant, that property is generating very little property tax for the city to use in its general fund.
North River being a great example.
Great example.
Yeah.
if you think about, if you project 20 years into the future, you've got a field house and restaurants, suddenly you've got millions of dollars of tax, property tax coming to the city.
Yeah.
Wow, wouldn't it be great if you could take that projection and use that money now?
Yeah.
That's what TIF is. It's basically saying we're going to take out a loan based upon what we know the future value is going to be of tax collection, and then that's going to fund the project. So it's completely funded by the project. It's not taxes. Your taxes aren't going up.
Yeah.
We're just freezing the taxes where they're at. The best part about it, in 20 years when the loan is paid off, now you're looking at property taxes fully going to the community at a much higher level than that vacant land. So I think that misconception when you hear that, the city is giving a tax break, it's really not accurate. And I think it's our fault, frankly, that we haven't explained that in a way that people can understand better.
Well, and I think what you just did is representative of what needs to happen, is talk about a level people can understand, because when we get too far into the, your words, not mine, nerd talk, people just tune out.
Right.
And there's a sense right now that people want to feel bad about taxes. People want to see it as just a burden. When used well, it can be a great public investment.
Right.
So it's just educating people, telling the story, and doing that over and over again.
Yeah, it's not free money. We're not picking winners. We're not saying we're going to give you a bunch of money. It's really capturing that increased value of a property over time.
Yeah, very well said. Okay, so last one, actually second to last one.
Yeah.
I'm going to spring a question on you. So what is a tool you use that helps you be more effective, be more efficient? Can be analog, can be digital, doesn't matter, but something you think that really helps you get the job done?
This is going to be weird. I think maybe
he
not.
says that as if all of this hasn't been weird.
Exactly. maybe it's not. Something that I've used throughout my career, and I use almost every day, that I think can benefit people working in all kinds of different fields, is the access to a city or a county's GIS, Graphic Information System.
Okay.
Which is attached to the assessor's office typically. But basically, it's a portal, an online portal that almost every city, definitely every county in the country has, where you can go on there and you can research. You can look just like you'd be looking at Google Maps. You're looking at an aerial photo with roads, and you can zoom in on your property. You can click on it. It'll give you information about acreage, value. Okay. You can look at the history of your site from the time it came on, your property from the time it came onto the tax rolls till present day. You can see when it sold and how much it sold for. And so I used it as a designer for many years. Before you pay for a survey, you can use an aerial photo, which is scaled, print it off, and you can trace over it and use it. You've got a measured drawing, basically.
Yeah.
And so it sort of saved money and time. If you're like, well, who's the property owner? I've got to talk to this property owner. You can click on that and find out who owns the property with contact information. So as a professional, it's in redevelopment, we do the same thing. Like, it's less about design now. It's more about, okay, we want to buy this property. It'd be great if we had this other one too for a complete parcel. Who owns that? Yeah, so it's sort of, it probably falls into that nerdy category as well, but it's also just interesting as a human, a property owner, as anybody to research. And a really cool thing about it is on the aerial photo, there's a slider, a historical view slider. So you can move that and go all the way back to, I think, 1950. Wow. And you can see Fort Wayne in 1950 as an area. A lot
of it's going to be farmland.
Yes,
What's
exactly.
now homes and developments.
Gradually move it.
So how do people find this? For our community.
Yeah, if you just Google Allen County GIS or City of Fort Wayne GIS, that's it, and it'll get you in there, and it'll take you a minute to figure it out. But it's a great tool, and if you're a business owner and you're just trying to figure things out, it's a great tool. I was tempted immediately. My first reaction was pencil and paper, because that's the first thing I go to. Yeah. Even with AutoCAD, with 3D modeling, design programs that I've used over the years. Everything starts. Yeah. Well, I think there's something about tactile that is different, right? And easy to get lost. I know I sometimes too quickly move to digital tools. Yeah. And,
something like this environment where there's no distraction in front of me. It's just conversation, pen and paper. So, yeah.
And it's tempting these days with the accuracy, with the photorealism that you can create in a digital model and AI.
Yeah.
It's very tempting to get ahead of yourself, right? You can put together this amazing rendering of a new building downtown and a park space around it, completely uninformed by reality at all.
Yeah.
When you're with pencil and paper, you've got to think about, here's the property lines, here's setbacks, here's the winds coming from this direction. I mean, it's a more comprehensive
It's really easy to
experience.
remove those variables when you absolutely need to factor them in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And by the way, folks, use that GIS page responsibly. Don't use it to harass your neighbors and business owners.
Of course, yeah. I know what you paid for your house.
So I almost want to end on that note, but Kara asked me to ask you about motorcycles. And I know that's not so much a question as a statement.
Okay.
But apparently that's important to you. Is this correct?
Well, it is. Surprisingly, I never owned a motorcycle in my life. I remember as a kid having some friends that had little dirt
So
bikes.
is Kara making stuff up?
No, she's not. I'm going to get to it.
Okay.
Really quickly.
All right.
But
this is the internal processing thing we talked about earlier.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I never had a motorcycle. I watched with envy with my friends that had little dirt bikes and I just sort of gave up on that. It wasn't a priority for me at all.
Sure. Yeah.
My wife and I were celebrating our 30th anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
Last year. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we went down to Indianapolis for the weekend. We were driving to a bookstore. We drove by a sign for a Triumph dealership, or it said Triumph on it. I don't know much about motorcycles, hardly anything actually, or I didn't.
Okay.
And I was like, I think those are cool motorcycles. Like,
it's one of those iconic brands.
yeah, in the old movies.
School.
I actually, my understanding was that this was probably like a museum.
Okay.
For motorcycles, for Triumph motorcycles. So we went to the bookstore, we went back and we went to the Triumph dealership and we walked in and it's obviously a showroom for a dealer. It's not a museum.
Yeah.
First couple of bikes we looked at were these big bikes that were, $30,000. And I'm like, this is cool. I don't.
This would be nice for someone with a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't need to spend $30,000. And then we get to these sort of smaller. They're called scramblers, and they're much more affordable.
Yeah.
And I like the way they look, and it's sort of like this cafe racer style. That's just sort of compelling.
Well, I like the name. I like the name Scrambler.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
And
it's kind of cool.
They're designed to be on road.
Hopefully, it doesn't scramble the person on them.
Hopefully not. Yeah, they're designed to be on road and off road, used for both.
Well, that's cool.
And so that's the whole idea with the scrambler. But at the same time, I'm just waiting for my wife to say, let's get out of here. What are you doing? You're not buying a motorcycle.
Why are you wasting my time?
And I would have been completely fine with that, right? Like it wasn't, I didn't
This is how you've stayed married for 30 years.
Yeah, I did not go in there with the idea that I was going to buy a motorcycle.
Thought it was a museum.
At all. But it sort of started the brain turning. She mentioned something about, well, how would you get it home if you bought it? And to me, that was like one step below encouragement.
It's like a challenge.
It was like,
this thing with wheels and a motor, how would you get that
I can't
home?
drive it because I don't have a license.
Okay.
And I don't know how to drive a motorcycle.
Fair enough.
Really.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, you could get a trailer, but, And so
there's ways to do that.
Yeah. And so I start sort of, I waited till after our anniversary weekend, but I started researching a little bit if I was going to get a motorcycle. And it turns out that the Triumph Scrambler is amazing. It's a small engine. It's an amazing motorcycle for a beginner. Fast forward a month later, I had a Scrambler. I'd passed my motor. I'd taken classes. I'd passed my test and sort of just jumped in 100% into that world and started commuting with it and absolutely loved it. Had the opportunity to go out to California, flew to San Francisco, rented a motorcycle, drove it down the Pacific Coast Highway for 3 days. So it's sort of just become this passion.
That's amazing.
And this sort of keys to adventure kind of a thing where not quite a midlife crisis, I don't think. I think it's more like kids are out of the house.
I've got a little more time.
And I can actually
do some
pursue
stuff
this
for
thing.
me.
Yeah. And
my wife's not completely
right.
She's not going to completely object, even if she's not completely on board.
Yeah, I mean, she has no interest in getting a motorcycle. She'll ride with me.
Yeah.
Doesn't love it. That's fine. I'm obviously, I've been married 30 years. I'm not going to take off and travel the world for 3 months.
Yeah, you've already done that.
Leave her at home. I did that. No, so that's what she's referring to is
okay.
Everything I do, Anthony. If I get into motorcycles, I shouldn't have even said the 3-month thing. I'll probably end up in Africa riding across half of the country or something.
Yeah,
because that's just how I do things. And I got into fly fishing 5 years ago, and that's another passion that I can't help myself. If I'm going to do it, I'm gonna jump all in.
Well, that's amazing, and it comes back to the curiosity thing.
It does,
right? Yeah. So
it does.
I'm interested to hear what you discover next that you dive into.
I feel like I don't have room, money, time for anything else.
Well, you probably didn't when you bought the motorcycle too, but you figured it out.
You're right.
You figured it out. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for doing this. It was great to learn more about you and hear your story. Really appreciate everything you do for the city of Fort Wayne.
Thank you. Appreciate the time today, and always happy to talk to you.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then. Thank you for listening to the Asher Marketing Podcast. The Asher Marketing Podcast is a production of Asher Agency, a full-service agency for franchises and co-ops, colleges and universities, financial service companies, healthcare organizations, and government agencies. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.